It's 1 o'clock, guys.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, we have.
Okay, well, item 9, adoption of the strategic plan. We have argued and debated this to death. Unless you've got something really substantive, I'm looking for a mover. Thank you. We've got a mover. Do we have a seconder? Fenton, you've just walked in, I'm sure. We have a seconder? Any He knows. Wirel's on board, mate. Rick, do you want to? Have you got any comments?
I like the Wirral Bridge on the front page.
That's right too.
It's good. We just need to get a bus on it.
Have you got anything you want to say about it?
Oh, look, this has been round the traps for a while, so let's get on with it.
Okay. Any other comment? All those in favour? Second recommendations? Aye. Against? It's carried. We're into item 10, recommendation from the Maori Committee. Mr Mohi, the floor is yours.
Yes, okay. We discussed the charter, which has been discussed a little bit too long as far as I was concerned. One of the reasons that it's taken this long is the dispute about who is to represent the Whanganui Roto, excuse me, which is the Napier type whenua. Just to give you a bit of history, they went into recess 5 or 6 years ago, and their duties were taken over by Ahuriri, Mana Ahuriri. And then when they reformed about 18 months ago, and especially with one of their new chaps, Peter Eden, demanding 3 seats back. At the same time, Tania came to me and said, we demand that we as a legal entity should be on there, and representing Maunga Haruru. So had a meeting with Mana Ahuriri and asked them if they would come to a little bit of a compromise, and they suggested one from Mana Ahuriri, one from Maunga Haruru, and one from the Tai Whenua. Since then, Mana Ahuriri, since Monday, have agreed that they will relinquish their seat. I'm meeting with the chairman of Whanganui Roto, which is the second chairman in the last 12 months, and will be saying to him, you have the opportunity through the charter to have your 3 seats, and if indeed that's what you want to do, Tania Hopkins has no right to demand one, even though she's only got one marae in her treaty group section.
Mike, can I just
Yes.
make a point there? Can you, as the chair of the committee, get this signed off on the Hiratonga, the Maori and his team, so that it's dealt
I'm
with?
sorry,
It's dealt with.
I was to carry on. On the 15th, it's just 2 weeks' time, we're having a workshop to confirm that.
Okay.
And just before that, I'm meeting with, as a courtesy, with the Napier Tai Whenua.
Okay, good. So you'll get it signed off by the town
Yes,
people?
yep.
And it won't be an argument.
Okay. So at the meeting also, there was a strong voice from Hiratonga Tai Whenua to have Maori constituencies, which would involve 2 Maori being on the full council, and as an example, it would probably be one representing from Napier to Wairau and one representing from Hastings through to Waipukurau. Now, there's they got a little bit excited about it until Councillor Barker sort of brought them into the realities of this. This council, as I understand it, Leanne, pull me up please if I'm wrong, has the ability to say yes, it can go to the next triennium, whatever the word is, triennium. It has to be voted by the general public if that was the case, or we can put up 5% of the voting public electorates to make that happen. I don't have a huge appetite for that. However, I said, look, The four tai whenua need to bring this to the table to discuss if indeed they want it to go ahead. So that's going to happen on the 15th as well. And look, I just apologise for some of these matters in the three councillors that come to our meeting have pulled me up before on some of the matters I bring. Some of them are actually discussed in the pre-meeting. I'm not sure whether this one was Mare Apatu from Heratona expressed concern with the lack of interplay, for want of a better word, between the Maori Committee and the Regional Planning Committee, especially regarding the tank. And Councillor Bevan will be aware that I sent an email to Mare asking him to meet with Liz Munro and De Peter to keep him informed on what tank had been doing, because I don't think Liz Munro was aware of it. And the last thing, there was quite a plea from the Whanganui-Roto candidate, member, that in November they're having a big day to unveil 2 po up the Mohaka River. And I think the whole day is going to cost them the thrones of $30,000. They're hoping to get councillors there. They're going to have to fly them in, or a day's paddling up the river, which Rex has agreed to do. Downriver. It was the other way back after the hangi. And so they've approached several groups, including my group, Ngāi Whenua, to sponsor that, but they are going to be coming to the council. So that's going to be quite a big event. He spoke at length on the significance of that po, but most of it I've forgotten. So that was all of it.
Thank you. Any questions for Mike? I'll move that we set the Maori Committee, second to Fenton. All those in favour? You want to speak?
Just briefly, just Councillor Barker put it quite nicely on the day about some of the challenges of Māori seats, but one thing that's come out of Wairoa, who've now accepted Māori seats, is who do you stand for? And the Deputy Mayor is a classic example. She's very popular. She's always the top polling candidate by a country mile. But she's now got to make a call that who's voting for her. Is it the Māoris or the Pākehās? So she's got to decide where she's going to stand going forward. And that's an unintended consequence of what some see as success, getting the Māori seats in a council which has a large proportion of Māori councillors anyway. But I'll just throw that on the table.
Could I respond to that and just say that one amongst our number is well known and regarded for his opinions, but what people don't appreciate is that he is one of the most classic subversives I've ever come across, and his plan to overcome the point that Fenton made is for everybody to register on the Māori seats.
Would they be available for the Maori All Blacks?
Yeah, just like Chris and Cullen.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments?
Just in response to Councillor Barker, I did at one stage try to enrol in the Māori roll, but I was disallowed because I couldn't state who my hapu iwi was.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, it's really more by way of question around 3.5 in Mr. Mohi's report. And I'm just wanting to know if there's an actual formal resolution around. He's advised that there's a clamour for 2 representatives on council itself. Is that a formal resolution? And the second question is there a sense that we've captured anything to go into this later paper to do with the electoral system?
So perhaps I could answer that. There are 2 different components to review of our electoral system required this year, the first of which is the STV FPP question. That is what's before us today. We are required to make a decision under legislation before the middle of September on that one. The question of Māori seats is a distinct and separate process for which we need to make a decision by mid to late November. I think it's mid to late, certainly in November, 23rd of November. And so there will be separate advice coming forward that will require a resolution of council with respect to Māori seats. So that's yet to come. And what Mr Mohi's referring to is the pre-discussion on that, because the council has asked the Māori Standing Committee and the RPC for a view on this.
But council can't unilaterally decide to have Maori seats on its
No,
own.
it
You have to
cannot.
go to referendum.
Correct. So
No, we
Sorry?
can unilaterally.
There is a sub to that.
We can unilaterally. We can.
You can resolve to establish Māori
plenty.
constituencies. Then that needs to be publicly notified with the, that also states the opportunity for the public to demand a poll which could countermand that.
Okay, come on.
Give 2 years' notice of
I think
that.
that winds it up. Do we have someone to? Oh, we've done that. You did. And I second it. All those in favour of receiving the Maori report? Aye. Thank you very much, Mr Mohi. Brilliant report.
Next meeting will be in Waipukaro, the centre of Hawke's Bay Regional Council.
Yeah, no, that's very good. I did have a comment, but I've forgotten what it was now, so that's fine. We'll move on to item 11. Electoral system. Mr Barker, this is the one we've been chit-chatting about.
look, I'll hand to Mrs Hooper on that one. Oh, sorry, to Liz. Sorry, Liz, I didn't see you sitting there.
That's right. Good afternoon, councillors. So this paper is, again, it's another requirement under the Local Government Act that from time to time, i.e. every 6 years, that the council considers the electoral system that it's going to conduct its elections under. So whatever you discuss and decide today will be relevant for the 2019 and 2022 local body elections. So the papers, there's really two choices in terms of the electoral system, and I'm not going to go through all the detail because it is provided appended to the paper, the pros and cons. But it's first past the post, which is what is currently, how the elections are currently conducted, and the single transferable vote. And really this paper just sets out the process that is required to keep this review moving. And in fact, the recommendations themselves really probably set it out. So you can either vote today to retain the status quo, which would be first past the post voting, the electoral system. You can resolve today to change it to single transferable vote, or you could resolve to hold a poll on it. So those are really the three
Thank
main
you.
options.
Thank you, Liz. We've had a little bit of discussion on this. Does anybody have a contra view to first past the post? Righto, come on. Let's do the questions.
Thank you. Liz, I really struggle to understand the description here of the STV voting system, so I'm hoping you
Sorry,
can...
page number, please.
Page 75 in our papers.
Yeah, I should bring some water.
So,
That's because it's legislation, councillor. It's never easy.
so it says, this is number 4, if insufficient candidates are elected under subparagraph 3, the proportion of an elected candidate's votes above the quota is redistributed according to the voters' further preferences. Okay, so let's say that the threshold is 5,000 and a candidate gets 8,000.
Yes.
That means you redistribute 3,000 votes. How do you know which 3,000 to take? Because all of those 8,000 votes might have different preferences. So that makes no sense to me.
It's not, if the person's over 8,000 votes, they're in, if the threshold's 5, and all the votes go with them. It's people before that, the ones under that threshold, their votes get redistributed.
That's not what this says. That is not what it says. It says the proportion of an elected candidate's votes above the quota is redistributed. That's what it says. And I'm saying, how do you know which votes to take?
According to the
Very
voters,
yeah.
according to the voters' second preference.
Very good question.
Yes, but of the 8,000 votes that are cast for him, how do you know which 3,000
to redistribute. That's my point.
Unless we can redistribute the whole lot.
Sorry.
It's absolutely right. If this is what it is, it's nonsensical, and I couldn't possibly support it.
So I can't answer that question. You're right. I mean, it's a very good question, but I can't answer how the mechanics work. Mrs. Hooper?
And it's not a person that's going to be making that decision. It's all through computer algorithms and formulas and everything else.
That's comforting. Councillor, are you considering other options?
I'm attracted towards this system, but not the way it's described.
Me neither.
And I don't. And the biggest problem of all is that if the councils don't all agree to do the same thing, there will just be huge amounts of voter confusion, and that's what I'm most concerned about.
My question is, I see that we went to a consultation with the Napier City and Wairoa, and that wasn't a decision that was made, as I recall, at this table. Whose decision was that to do?
The decision around any review of the electoral system is made by the electoral officer. In this case, Mrs. Hooper.
Well, if that's the case, why are we even considering this paper?
Because you are obliged to make a decision on the electoral system that you want to conduct the next two elections under.
Well, I'd like written advice that says the decision to consult on the electoral system resides entirely with the electoral officer. I would have thought the decision to consult on something such as fundamental as this that belongs to the council. That's my view. I saw the advert and I just wondered when that got on there. The other thing is, I'd like you to take me through the recommendations, because I'm struggling to make them make sense, just as they are read, as they are written.
Councillor, you're referring specifically to number 2?
No, just the recommendations, 1, 2. I get the last bit 4, and last bit 3, but I'm just wondering how these recommendations make sense. Because normally council officers write recommendations that councillors can simply move, but I can't see how I can move a 1 and or something else and make it make sense.
Okay. So would it help if we actually just numbered those options under number 2, so 2A, B and C, and then you could resolve to move whichever one of those you preferred?
Well, I just think that it's poorly written. But to help here, I would like to move that we retain the status quo.
I'll second that.
Sorry? I would like to move the status quo because for 2 reasons. Firstly, I've not heard one person ever say there's a problem with our current voting system. No one said, not one person, never ever. So I'm a great fan of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. On the second thing is that we have an example of STV here in Hawke's Bay, and it's with the hospital board. and the voting system is basically no constituency at large. And it's on a preferential voter. And there is no direct link between the people who are elected and an area or a group. And I think the great strength of this place here is that we have Wairoa, we have a Wairoa rep, we have CHB, we have a CHB rep, we have Napier reps, Hastings reps. And that's a strength, and people see a direct link between their vote, their representative, and their council. And I think it works really well. And if you think about how the importance of the DHB is to this region and its health, and who understands the connection between where they live, their representative, and the district health board. No one gets that. I would say to you, it would be hard pressed for anybody around here to write on a piece of paper now the elected representatives on a DHB. Neil might. But that's the point I want to make to you. Whereas our one here is clear, people represent, and I think it works really well. If someone can put up an argument why if there are some flaws in it, I'd be happy to do it. But if it was, I don't think STV is the alternative for it. And I just think we're creating false work and false expectations by running up and down on this issue. That's my view.
No, point of order. Point of order. I'm not clear what's been moved and what hasn't been moved, and I want to seek your clarification. Councillor Barker moved a resolution to maintain the status quo.
2.8.
Okay, but then 3 and 4 require us to give public notice so that if the public choose to, they can object to this. Is that part of what we're debating here, or is that? It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just on making things difficult. No need to change. No, there's no public demand or whatever for any change.
Could we start with the W's at the top of the page and go down the other way?
Thank you, Chair. I find it remarkable that as politicians we're not familiar with what STV actually means and what sort of voting system it is. It's relative, to my mind, it's relatively simple. It's used in a number of other jurisdictions in New Zealand, not just the Health Board or the DHBs. It's also used in Palmerston North. It's also used in Wellington City, and it seems to work perfectly satisfactory for them. I would disagree with Councillor Barker's comments around the DHB because that's not a problem with it being an STV or a first past the vote for type of vote. It's to me that's to do with it not being broken into wards, whereas of course the regional council is broken into wards. As for a comment that it ain't broke, so don't change it, simply because it ain't broke doesn't mean there's not a better system out there. So I would speak favourably in favour of STV, because I do believe it gives us, or gives everyone, a much better representation, a much fairer representation of the people who actually stand, because essentially it brings in, if your vote isn't counted, it brings in your second choice, potentially brings in your second choice, and so on. So yeah, I'll be voting against this motion because I would prefer to see option 3 or 2.C or whatever you want to call it, but I appreciate that councillors have other views on that.
Okay, Rick, yeah, you're going to have a go at me, aren't you, about directors?
No, I'm just going to say that I respect the views of Councillor Bailey, but if the Councillor Bailey is going to say it's fairer, it's an entirely subjective view. And if people are going, when I say this ain't broke, don't fix it, I'm not saying that's to the detriment of anybody showing as it's a better system. No one has shown us that it is actually a better system. It's just different. But I think the system we have works really well, and I'm delighted to support it continuing, because I think it's a clear, direct link between people in the areas, their representative, and their regional council, and it's worked extremely well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, councillors. So we are moving to the recommendations 1 to 4, and that includes 2A.
Yep.
So to retain the status quo. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? One. Show of hands, all those in favour?
I has to call for a division.
He did. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Paul, for your thoughts on that matter. Right, what have we got now? Fixing the common Item 12, the common seal.
Just noting, Chair, that we continue to freehold
So-
properties, so there's a list of them there.
Do we have a seconder? I'll second. Okay, all those in favour of accepting the recommendation? Unless you want to speak, Neil, or you fine? All those against? It's carried unanimously. Okay, item 13, work plan. I think we might just say, I mean, you've all read this. Do you have any, does anyone have any questions? I have one for a start. In the water quality, how high were the nitrate concentrations?
Chair, look, I can't answer that. I have asked Mr Maxwell to come down for the follow-up item on Tutera, so he may be in a position to do
It's
that.
on 2 points we have it. Okay, any other questions?
So just on that matter, Chair, I'm more than happy to
I'll talk to him.
to have it followed up, and we can provide that by email to councillors.
Alan?
Is there any reason why Ahuriri was not successful in the Freshwater Improvement Fund application, that you know of?
To the best of my knowledge, we have not yet been provided with feedback on why it was not successful. Obviously, Tuki was unsuccessful as well. And I do understand that many regions submitted multiple projects that were not successful. So I suspect there was a bit of a rationing exercise done. In fact, Mr Maxwell's just coming in now, and he may know the reason why the Ahuriri Freshwater Improvement Fund bid was unsuccessful. Have we had feedback yet from MFE?
No, we don't know the detail in terms of what was unsuccessful at this point, but we are pursuing that.
There was some feedback. It was a limited feedback.
Limited feedback, and certainly not enough for us to go away and say, well, this is what we need to do to improve success next time.
Any more questions?
Number 45, the Tongoil Marae, is that, I know it's a modelling design to become, is that in your mind even feasible?
That would be a question for Mr Hanson, who's not present today. Would need to come back to you on that. Look, obviously the purpose of the exercise is to work out whether it is feasible or not, and I don't think anyone's seen the outcome of that work at this point.
Do we have a mover to accept the report?
Mr Chairman, just before you do, I wonder whether I could ask the Chief Executive in regard to the Havelock North inquiry and progress and plans. Is that something we ought to have on our report process, or?
So if I could clarify, Councillor, are you talking about work that we're doing on drinking water arising from the incident?
No,
going forward, or you're talking
specifically in
about
relation
the
to
tribunal
inquiry
itself?
and
So the inquiry, we have finished providing submissions to the inquiry. They are now in their report writing phase. I don't think we've got anything further that we anticipate by way of interaction with the inquiry. So in terms of the inquiry itself, that is essentially now complete.
Supplementary to that, given the inquiry findings will be out, December, I understand, have we got both contingencies and anticipation of that findings and any steps that may arise? Is there thought given to how we might address the outcomes?
So it's our expectation that the Joint Working Group and the Joint Committee work program over the next year or two, or possibly more, will be substantially driven by the findings of the inquiry. We expect to be bringing through to you in the long-term plan some proposals to increase the level of resource that we're providing. You'll be aware that we have traditionally put relatively limited resources into the area of drinking water. We have increased the level of work since the incident last year. That has been an unbudgeted item, and so we'll need to provide for that properly in the LTP.
I had more in mind the, if you like, any potential criticism or issues arising from findings that the inquiry may have at that time. So, you know.
Do you want me to? So stage 2 is it's not an exercise of finding fault. So that was stage 1. This stage is very much about options, possibilities, recommendations for improving the system in general, including legislative reform, policy reform, new regulatory authorities, a range of recommendations that are likely to come from the inquiry stage 2 report. I think importantly that it is a series of recommendations to the government, some of which we would probably usefully anticipate a government response to that and set in place any changes that the inquiry report anticipates. And I would be expecting that the joint working group would be working pretty hard across the detail of that and providing advice to the joint governance committee in terms of some recommendations, because it's likely to span a number of councils. But it may also be prudent just to wait and see how the government responds in terms of the things that it then sets out to do and any recommendation it picks up, because at that stage I would anticipate if there's further reform of policy or law, for example, that we would have, we would be brought into processes around that and may well have the opportunity for submissions and further input to the development of that. So it's probably a little bit premature for us to know exactly which way to jump. The things that we've anticipated need doing, we're already doing and have put in place and are running. We were thinking we would need to wait to see what the inquiry stage 2 report brings that we hadn't anticipated and then figure out what we do about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a mover to accept the work stream? Tom and Paul. Do you wish to speak, Tom? Paul? Anyone else wish to speak? All those in favour? Aye. It's carried. Now the moment you've all waited for, Chairman's report. Hallelujah. 3 pages. I highlighted 4 topics which I think are on my mind at the moment, which I feel are that we're challenged with. Happy to take questions on any of them. You will have all read it and
Memorised it.
And then my busy schedule.
Yes, question. So on the 18th of August, what is the Rex Graham Cup? Is it a drinking club, a cup or something?
There's the Bledisloe Cup in Hadlock North, mate, between 2 primary schools.
Very
I think the issue that we've done the Ruataniwha to death, the water conservation order we talked about this morning. The big issue that I see facing us, the big decision, is my 4th item, I think it was. The workshop with the mayors. It's and I quote Fenton on this, because after the amalgamation debate, he said to me, we are going to have to start taking a post-amalgamation view of the world. And I strongly agree with that. Certainly, the mayors believe that we are, well, I should say they would like us to take a post-amalgamation view of the world in terms of collecting certain taxes which only we can collect on a regional basis. This was highlighted with the civil defence, and civil defence has been rationalised, and there were 4 different ways of collecting, of funding for civil defence. And it's been rationalised and trying to get into one. But the only real way that you can collect it regionally is we collect it. So the mayors would like to have a workshop with us. We invited them to do so, and discuss, how we would do this and how we would do it with their support, because if we take off some of, and I'm not saying we do, because it has to go before a council, how would they support us in that process, and where does this start and end? Currently we have the tourism one, which of course is the economic rate, and we put it all to tourism. It's proposed that we would discuss taking on the civil defence one, and of course you could also put on other ones here if you wished. So I don't want a huge amount of discussion now, because everyone will have a different view of this and you haven't had time to think about it, but I do want to set a date to workshop and have all the territorial mayors there so that we can thrash this around, and so we're not just carrying the can for their difficult decisions, and it seemed to be fair and equitable. So I do. You do wish to comment, Tom?
Are we finished?
Well, how about we do have a little bit of a discussion. We've got time on that now.
Just two thoughts. One is, for that meeting, we might identify what is the common information base for that meeting. Should there be something that, for example, it'd be interesting to see what's the total local government take in Hawke's Bay?
Yeah.
Who's contributing to that pot? Because if you were to shift around who's going to actually mail the bill, you could say, here's the pot. And if we're going to take on responsibility for invoicing people for civil defense and tourism and so forth, okay. If there's agreement as to what the whole pot is, folks can't hide. You see what I'm saying? They can't re-rate that, recharge that for some other purpose. So if we have 100 widgets and we usually account for 30 and we're going to go up to 40, well, now there's only 60 left for the other 4 councils. They have to live within that cap. It's a way of putting a belt around it and saying, fine, we're not going to hoodwink the ratepayers into thinking, you're getting double dipped on this, as we did on the last go-round.
Yeah, which is the major issue. Any other comment?
Mr. Chairman, I thought we came to a decision that we were going to regionally rate for and rationalise civil defence.
No.
No?
No, we haven't, no.
What was it? What did we decide the other day?
That's the first time. We had a civil defence meeting, and Ian put it on the table that some of the difficulties he'd been having and the time and energy spent in the process that we've got, and would we consider going this way? And James and I said we would have to put it before our council as a particular issue. And I said I wasn't prepared to put it before our council unless the other mayors came along with a workshop with us and we talked it through with them, because these are issues which affect all of Hawke's Bay, and they can't just stand to one side and just throw us the bits and pieces. At the moment, we do control civil defence, and everybody contributes to it, but they contribute in different ways, and he has to invoice them. It takes a lot of time and unravelling it. So a single rate definitely would be streamline it from his perspective, and maybe from us. We need to talk about that. Debbie?
I'm on a different subject if you're ready for...
I'd like to thrash this one out, because it's
Can I just respond to that? Just to follow up from Alan. Yes, we did discuss it, and what I understood was the civil defence issue was raised here for us to see whether we had an interest in proceeding with this, and I thought that's what we agreed was an interest in proceeding with this, to go and develop it. And the next step is, as Rex has put out, is the mayors turn up and we go through it. And I agree with Tom, we do need to have a common set of figures to work on, and so we're not going to be gamed on this, because I sense that there is a real potential to be gamed on this. And I also have another worry, is that if we take this step, be quite a few other things, the mayors want to come along and say, having established the principle, you collect all the money, do all the work, and we can then carry on to it, we will be in a very challenging position. So I'm with Tom, proceed with caution, but I think we should proceed.
We have a workshop with them.
Workshop with the mayors.
Well, we did remove from the strategic plan this clause that said that we would set up a fund for regional projects. And I believe it was very wise to make that decision, because the very next day in the newspaper was that we were supporting the aquarium revamp.
Yeah, no, with the aquarium, I actually haven't had any comment, but I understand that we are supporting them, you know, and saying, well, jolly good show, get on, and but we're not going to support them with cash.
Yeah, no, that's
And
fine, but their
yeah.
expectation would be that we would support them with cash.
Well, if they haven't got the message in the first instance, I'd be very surprised. I noticed the Goodman Group is doing it again and expecting a phone call, but I'll be delivering exactly the same message as I delivered before.
And so you should.
Neil?
Well, you're taking comment, Mr Chair, you know, this is the thin edge of the wedge. If you start opening this little pot, you end up precisely where we are with tourism from a ratepayer's perspective. You get that duplication going on. It's inevitable. What happens? Each council creates its own little empire. I'm even on civil defence. I'm saying, you know, does this mean each of the councils who inevitably have a role, a statutory role, do they abrogate their responsibilities back to regional council? Look, it's to me, it ought to be a long, long way from a green light at all in terms of the relationship. So if you want an alternative view, once you go down this road, you'll end up wearing the bill when we've got all these other priorities around the environment. We're looking to increase our rate base anyway, and here we've got, you know, the potential to really blow out the ask of the ratepayer that we'll inevitably have anyway.
Are you happy to have a workshop with the mayors and tell them that?
Well, as long as there's a little bit of reality around this, and it's not all hearty, hail well met, and all that sort of stuff, and clapping hands. So, you know.
Are we going to wait till we have a mayor?
Well, no, we don't have to wait till we have a mayor. I think we should get on and but may be sensible to do that. Paul?
Chair, could I just comment just briefly that part of the value proposition we were discussing with the other councils was the parallel consultation that we're doing on long-term plans. So everybody's out there talking to the ratepayers about rates and activities, and we will be doing that in parallel with TAs in each of the districts, and there seems to be an opportunity to get better aligned in a post-amalgamation world around who does what, and assure ratepayers that there is coordination, alignment, not duplication.
That would be the issue. On the same subject, because Debbie wants to change the...
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Chair. No, I think it's one of the things that we should be looking at. I don't think we should resolve from looking at it, but the devil's going to be in the detail, and until we've sat down and talked with the other mayors, we don't know what the detail is.
Thank you. Debbie, another...
I just wanted to pick up on the challenges resulting from Plan Change 6, standing in isolation, and I mean, obviously we're all concerned here. There's a huge amount of community concern as well. So there's a group that's putting together a delegation to come, and the suggestion was that they came to the Regional Planning Committee, which you've agreed, just to discuss some of the community impacts in terms of what's impacts of the increase in the minimum flows, but jobs downstream, and the idea was to look at some of the, across the primary sector and the rural community, you know, the urban township as well. So that was planned for the 4th of October, if that suits you.
Yeah, I think I need to talk to Tori about that, but yeah, I've agreed to that, so
Thank you.
we'll make that happen.
In terms of
Just the 4th.
any more to report on what council's doing in this space, James? I've been summoned to a meeting to report back this afternoon.
So there is an outstanding action with the Strategic Development Group to bring some advice back to the Regional Planning Committee around Plan Change 6 implementation post RWSS. So that work is underway, and there was not a definitive date given for the report back on that, but it will certainly be in the next couple of months.
There was a meeting a couple of weeks ago in the community, and I'd just like to thank Ian for coming down to it, because I was really grateful for your support in putting a balanced and informative approach into that. Thanks.
Chair?
Yeah.
Just considering this is now on the public record, I'd like to go a step further than Councillor Hewitt, and I think the WCO is written as a serious threat to the economic fabric of our region. I get that, but actually you could add in there, and the challenges resulting from Plan Change 6 without the dam are the same thing. You can't kick the ball with both feet here. There's an economic fabric issue south of Heratonga as well. And I think you need to be as loud and proud about that as you are about the WCO.
Yeah, so you don't think I'm strong enough saying that?
I welcome more support in that.
Well, I just think it's a message that needs to come out of here. You know, this has brought us together, and actually Plan Change 6 on its own is unworkable. Simple as that. And it's thrown the community down there into turmoil, as you're probably well aware. So I think we need to be, let's take the demarcation line of the boundary out and say, actually, these two issues are huge.
Yeah, no, they are huge. I didn't mean to downwrite it. It's just that I'm living this one right now. I accept that.
Could you change this somehow, perhaps? Would you be interested
Yeah,
before
no,
we
I
accept?
would be interested in changing it. I would be interested, but I'll need to do that.
Plan Change 6 is written as a serious threat to the economic fabric of our region.
I will change it, Fenton.
Well, we're going to accept it now, though.
We have to accept it unchanged because I'm not. I need to be really careful on my words there.
Yeah, but just might raise an issue here. This, my experience, a chairperson's report is a chairperson's report, and you either accept it or reject it. It's not up for amendment. It's my. But if the author wants to change it, it's up to the author.
Yeah, I don't want to change it right now, though.
Yeah, but I just think Fenton's point is well made, and I just think rather than try and change the report here, we just have to change the debate as we go forward. That's what Fenton's asking for, and I agree with that.
Well, then I won't support this.
Okay. Do we have a mover to accept the chairman's report?
I move.
Mover? Seconder? All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Against.
Against. Thank goodness it's accepted. Okay, we have the items not on the business, on the agenda, business not on the agenda, to Terra.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that had a very successful planting day up at Tutera, joint event put on by the Regional Council and the Mangahuru Tangatu Trust, and 100 odd people turned up, including we put on a bus from here and had 28, I think it was my head count, people on the bus, so I was very pleased with it. And Ian may want to add some more about where we're up to with things, or we may not.
Thank you. Waipaka Rao. Stink, I think you said.
Yeah, I'm sitting here with the last weekend's Hawke's Bay Day paper.
Councillor, can I ask you to put your...
Which, among other things, refers to helicopters top dressing the area with calcium ammonium nitrate, with the chief executive saying that now it's almost as if the plan is rejecting the solutions, with a description of we're now getting our lawyers on the case to find out whether the 5-year guarantee from Water Clean Technologies is, are we getting what we're supposed to be getting out of this? I mean, this seems like a total calamity. We seem to be, I'm not sure what our posture is, but I was going to raise with you at our next meeting that it's certainly at the next Environment Committee meeting, we ought to get some kind of review of what the hell is going on. We went on a field trip down there. We were painted this rosy picture of, oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And, you know, it seems to be getting worse by the week. And when there have been smell, this is just with the smell issue alone, we were all over tomato mushrooms when some smell got over the you know, wrong street into the wrong neighborhood. But anyway, what does this mean to us? The fact that this is on the verge of collapse.
Councillor, without having read whatever Hawke's Bay Today has written, and being able to verify that, I can just advise what we've done to date, and that includes working with Central Hawke's Bay. They are actively trying to find solutions. I can't comment without further information on what you've just read out. But they are actively trying to find solutions for the odour problem. They are keeping us informed at the moment. I qualify that, at the moment. We're satisfied that they are doing everything that they can to try and sort it out. But we are continuing to keep a close eye on that. One of the things that we suggested was that they may like to engage an outside expert to look at this particular issue, similar to the way that we've required them to do that as part of the enforcement order for the discharge. And they've quite readily agreed to that. So we take that as also a positive step. And I'm not sure if there's any context around any outside expert on that or quite, I'm sorry, I'm just not aware of the detail around that. But it's certainly something that the compliance team are keeping a very close dialogue with Central Hawke's Bay on. And yes, we will keep you updated on where that's going to.
This is directly quoting their new chief executive.
Yeah.
This is directly quoting their chief executive as saying, boy, this thing may have never worked, may never work. And we have kept holding on, to the prospect that, victory was around the corner here. How long are we going to let that go on?
Look, I just might make the observation that I'm not sure that you could say we have been holding on. The Regional Council's preference, was always a land treatment option, and I understand that the new Chief Executive of the Central Hawke's Bay District Council is of the view that that probably was the best course of action, but obviously her predecessor and the Council of the day made a different decision. And we had to respond to the resource consents that were sought for amendment and sought. So we weren't in a position where we could do anything more than encourage them in a direction and manage the consents in accordance with the RMA. So it is a sorry saga, and it's disappointing we're in this position. But I certainly don't think that the current set of arrangements were anything that we have actively pursued ourselves.
So would you have wanted to be down there on field day when the helicopters were spraying ammonium nitrate over the entire, I mean, who's making these decisions?
Well, they are.
So presumably that they were entitled to do that under a permitted activity rule. I haven't heard any sense that they were undertaking a non-complying activity, although that's something we can check with our compliance staff to see whether or not.
Okay, visit to China.
Thank you. Last Monday, I joined Wainwright and we hosted the Chinese sister city Suzhou delegation visit. So they had their Deputy Secretary General, or anyway, Minister of Sport or equivalent, Minister of Education, Minister for the Elderly. There were 9 of us over the lunch, and it was really interesting actually. And Zhong was there, who we travelled into China with. A couple of the issues that they are facing in terms of the sister city relationship just came up, which I would like to just be part of discussions offline when we look at how we continue this relationship going forward. But in terms of their time in New Zealand, they had a visa. They were allowed out of the country from the rules on their end for 5 days, and that included their travel times. They landed in Auckland, drove, don't know why, but they drove to Hawke's Bay, got caught up behind an accident on the Napier Taupo Road for several hours. I overnighted here, had a look around the sports park, Tamata Peak, I think Hastings Boys, a rest home, Somerset rest home, and the Mission. That was one of their highlights. Sat down for lunch with me, and then off they went to Rotorua for a night and gone. So it's a huge effort for them. But I was pleased to be able to go along, and I thought in terms of progressing their relationship, and obviously I was over there with Mike and Fenton. Was it coming up 18 months ago? That it was. I thought it was valuable, but I would, going forward, welcome the opportunity to discuss how we do this sister city relationship better.
When are we going back?
The invitation was extended for next year.
Accept.
Thank you, Dylan.
One that's not on the thing, would I be able to have that?
Only for you, Mr.
Okay, thank you. A week or so ago, 4 officers, including Ian Maxwell, came to talk to the tamatea. I'd just like to apologise for the poorly arranged meeting. You were supposed to go on at 3:45. you were there at 3:30 and went on at 6 o'clock. That was managed by the co-chair in the absence of Roger Marker, and he has asked me to apologise. The co-chair thought that everybody wanted to listen to her rather than you. So next time it'll be we'll gag that person and listen to you. Thank you.
Appreciate that, but no apology is required. So, but appreciate that.
Thank you very much. That's the end of our meeting. Thank you for your attendance.
Just some feedback on the new video. My wife's been watching it and she said it's very clear, word of warning, you can't pick your nose.